Hello and welcome. Today we are going to be doing a reacts video to Christopher Hitchens' 10 Commandments. Just to preface this, Christopher Hitchens was definitely categorized himself as an anti-theist. The tagline of his book was "Why Religion Poisons Everything," and I just want to make abundantly clear that this is not a position I agree with. While I am an atheist, much like Christopher Hitchens, although he identified as an anti-theist, my opinion is that religion is relatively net neutral in terms of poisoning everything relative to being non-religious. I think both are neutral and don't cause people to behave more or less morally, but I just wanted to put that out of the way. If you are of a religious sentiment, this video might be annoying to you or it might be interesting. I have no idea. This is one of the very few videos of Christopher Hitchens on the internet I've never ever seen ever, so let's get into it.
I'm Christopher Hitchens, and implausible though it may seem, I want to talk about the 10 Commandments. Who am I, you may well ask, to instruct or advise you on these grave matters, but even Moses himself was a revisionist and issued at least 4 versions of the Decalogue, or the top 10. So if he can be a revisionist, well, so can I. Picture then, if you...
That's a little bit of an interesting intro. Perhaps this video is not going to be as I suspected in terms of dragging the 10 Commandments, although the 10 Commandments in general seem relatively straightforward and good, and maybe this is what Christopher Hitchens is going to be on about.
You will, that I'm not just taking a blue pencil, but an actual chisel, and seeing if these tablets of stone could possibly stand a bit of an update for our time. Numbers 1 and 2 actually don't have anything to do with ethics at all. They are injunctions. They remind or instruct you that I am the Lord thy God, that thou shalt have no other gods before me, and they forbid the making of graven images. The commandment against the making of graven images, or images of God, is very upsetting to many Catholics who often leave this bit of the commandment out.
Let's take a look. I'm not sure what actually constitutes
the commandment
a graven
against
image.
the making of graven images, or
but yes, that does seem like
images
something
of God,
that contemporary
is very upsetting
Catholics
to many
leave
Catholics
out.
who often leave this bit of the commandment out, because where would Christian art and devotional painting be if you couldn't make impressive images of God, his son, his son's mother? Then we are...
So that seems to be, to me, an interesting point. Although Hitchens does not have his usual bombastic bluster, perhaps that is because this was for Vanity Fair, and it needs to be a little bit more tempered. But usually, you can find a ton of debates of him on the internet debating Christians.
rather sternly ordered not to take the name of this God in vain, and it's then added rather superfluously that you won't be held guiltless if you do take the name of this Lord in vain. Well, no one has ever worked out exactly how to obey this commandment. Is it taking the Lord's name in vain to shout, God is great, while blowing yourself up and killing innocent people? Some say it's obedience to the law of God.
Yeah, that's a little bit more of the Christopher Hitchens shade I was expecting, but he is of course referring to I believe it's Allahu Akbar, is God is great in Arabic, but I'm not sure.
When I say God knows, I really mean I think that nobody knows. It's usually wise when promulgating eternal laws to be clear about what you mean. Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy.
And I don't think that this is necessarily something that Christopher Hitchens is necessarily super privy to, but a lot of times with stuff like the 10 Commandments or anything written a really long time ago, you know, the series of translations that occur post the creation of such a thing tend to, you know, significantly diminish or affect or like deeply vary the translation. Like in Greek, there's like, I forget how many, like 5 to 6 words for like love. I think there's 4 words for spirit and these sorts of things, and they all have a bit of nuance, and it can't properly be captured with translation, but just something to think about.
The Christians who want this inscribed in courtrooms and in schoolrooms would end up taking Saturday off rather than Sunday, because this program of commandments is actually a program for the establishment of a fundamentalist Jewish state. Commandment number 5.
I find that one interesting. Hitchens is, he knows quite a bit about the Bible in order to make a critique of it, although he does tend to focus on particular things quite a lot. Like the one he brings up a particularly large amount is the Abraham and Isaac incident, let's call it. Although he might consider that a generous characterization, whereupon Hitchens often describes how barbaric it is to, for a god to ask you to sacrifice your child. But often so saying, if such a god did exist, he would certainly be evil, is the type of argument he makes.
Enjoins that thou shalt honor thy father and thy mother, which seems reasonable enough. It's an interesting commandment because when given in full, it says that if you do so, you will have a longer tenure of the land that's been promised to you. It's one of the few commandments that comes with an inducement, if you will. It even seems to suggest that you should honor your father and mother because you expect a legacy from them. Number 6.
So we see Hitchens being a little bit generous with that last one. I'm assuming he's going to be generous with thou shalt not kill and shall find it to be fundamentally a good idea, I'm guessing. I was expecting a lot more shade from him, but we'll see.
Thou shalt not kill. Almost immediately after the events at Sinai and the delivery of these instructions by God from the top of the mountain, Moses orders all his supporters to draw their swords and kill all their friends and brothers for their profanity. Number 7.
Yep, that is the classic Hitchens little bit of shade. He doesn't talk about whether or not it's a good commandment. I think it's obvious he thinks it's a good one. He just points out the hypocrisy.
Thou shalt not commit adultery. The Turkish government, an Islamic party, recently tried to make this actual law in Turkey itself.
That is a interesting, I don't think it should be a law, but it's not incoherent to potentially make fidelity like a contract where you have to I don't know, some sort of fine, but of course you just make it so that I think that's just in a slap in the face of liberalism in general if you can't violate such a thing. But I think that I would not be entirely against the idea of a sort of contract where if you are not transparent about it, lying about it, you're subjected to some sort of fine or something. But that's a weird tangent to be on about. In general, I think people should be allowed to do what they want, but there being certain types of contracts, you obviously can't do anything financial, whatever you want, if you have a financial contract with someone. And so if you made a similar type of contract with someone where, we're going to not sleep with other people, and if you violate this contract, XYZ thing occurs, I don't think it's entirely unreasonable to have that sort of contract, but that's much different than, it just being against the law and it being a prison thing. I'm thinking more so of fine.
But failed. It's difficult to see why this well-known offense should be classified with murder and theft and perjury.
Yeah, I am with Hitchens on this, in that murder and theft definitely seem a lot worse, although perjury is, as I was referring earlier, it's a little bit more on the deception that you're thinking of what's the problem with adultery, or at least in my opinion, I have much less a problem, and so it's a sort of lying. I don't know, that's a little one that's perhaps, I don't know, it's a personal thing. It shouldn't be a public thing, but in terms of public policy, but I think that not necessarily that adultery should be against the law, but perhaps there should be a mechanism for if you want to voluntarily enter in a non-adultery like contract that you can do so with another person, that there is it is legal to make such a mechanism. And I think to some extent there is, right, with like prenuptial agreements that like void the prenup if you engage in adultery. So I guess it's already present. So fair enough. Now that I think about it more.
Usually the punishment for those who commit it is what you might call self-inflicted. Commandment number 8, thou shalt not steal. Very little to quarrel with here. We don't know of any society that has a commandment saying it's okay to steal, or a social custom.
Yeah, so without unpacking too much like what philosophical moral relativism is, like this is like a type of, I identify with that position, although there's like a lot to unpack, and it's not like what the mainstream thinks of relativism, but like one criticism is like murder and theft, and it's just, if you want to have any type of society at all, you have to be, murder has to be against the rules, and also you have to have property rights of some sort in order for such a thing to be like, you know, we can't pause with Hitchens with looking like this. But it's yeah, there's no society that has organized itself well, and it's not necessarily that these things are innately moral, but if you ever want to organize a society, they are going to be like necessary. So like they're an innate necessary condition to organizing any type of society, that people have to feel like safe to operate in that society if they've done nothing wrong, so i.e. be free of murder, and they have to be able to acquire property, otherwise there's they won't be, it's a different kind of safety, you know, that you have to know that you can accumulate resources in some way without some other person just taking it from them for any type of societal organization to begin with. So of course it's going to make a good commandment.
Then we arrive at a moment of comparatively rare nuance and sophistication. Thou shalt not bear false witness against thy neighbor. The idea of convicting someone who is innocent by bearing false testimony against them is and should be shocking to the entire human conscience. So this is not only one of the finest of the commandments, maybe the finest.
Hitchens complimenting something coming from religion. This is a rare sight.
But in its stress on the not and the false witness against, it shows a very rare and careful sense of the balance and scruple that's required for judgment and justice. The last of
scruple, what's required for judgment and justice. I mean, I think that Christopher Hitchens is essentially like correct on that point. And I mean, I think he's gonna rip up this next upcoming one though. Yeah, thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's house, thou shalt not covet thy because this is just an injunction against freedom, which is generally not Hitchens' shtick, although he might note that this is something that can get you in trouble, but it's kind of personal trouble that you should be responsible for if you do any such coveting. So let's see.
At least this version of the Ten Commandments is also sometimes famous by its number 10. It forbids the coveting of your neighbor's or thy neighbor's goods, these to include his ox, his ass, his wife. I think there may be 3 thinkable objections here. First and most obvious, it considers the female of the human species to be equivalent to the chattel. Second, by way of objection,
Hitchens, by the way, he self-identifies under the philosophy of like humanism, where he just values all humans in a general sense, which is like, let's say, antithetical to, you know, a patriarchal society, or antithetical to nationalism, in which case your own nation or citizens of your like own ethnicity or these sorts of things are viewed as being like extraordinary. So he did do like a lot of advocating for people internationally, and he's if you can't tell by his accent, he's like British born, but he is a United States citizen, or was.
It's the only commandment that punishes thought. Here you're not for
thought crimes. A very classic things that Hitchens would object to in general on religion.
Forbidden to do anything. You're forbidden to think even about something. And third, the attempt to suppress an instinct, a desire that must have been put by God into us in the first place. Otherwise,
Again, he wants to
how
drag
would we know?
hypocrisy.
The essential division of opinion is this: did God make men, or did men make many gods? There are enough discrepancies just in the well-known version for us to be certain that we're looking here at a God who improvises, who's jealous, who's short of temper, who's inconsistent, or, if by any chance God didn't make Moses and the Hebrews, that the people who made God were jealous, short-tempered, inconsistent, and capricious in their turn.
Yeah, Hitchens starts to bring it back around. You know, in terms of making God, this pause is so bad too. This one, he just droops his eyes a lot. Feels bad, but he's trying to bring it back around and, you know, talk about how I think that this is like kind of classical of his way of thinking. It's like, what do these commandments in particular say about anyone who would have written them? And like so some of them are great, like the don't bear false witness, like don't murder, don't steal, like these types of things. But he is talking about the God being like envious in a sense, or the people who made the God being envious in a sense, which I think that, you know, being able to do these meta level like abstractions when you're encountering like any type of system, I think is important. You know, and I'm not just talking about the Ten Commandments here. Like I'm talking about any sort of system. Be like, whatever the rules of the system are, like what do they say about you know, the individuals who put them up? Like a lot of them, like if you have rules at work that are particularly nitpicky about a particular way that things are done, it obviously is going to say something about whoever wrote those rules, right? And so that he is bringing like this sort of critical faculty into the evaluation of the laws, I think is good.
But as between the consideration that man was made by God, or that many gods were made by men, I've never thought there was much doubt as to which was the correct version. How might a Decalogue look if it was written for the 21st century? I never quite trust myself beginning a sentence by saying,
oh, this is exciting. I wonder if I can predict some of them. I mean, so like he's going to operate from, I guess, a perspective of humanism, right? And generally like an old school definition of liberalism, although I'd be reluctant to maybe call him a libertarian, because I don't think that he holds a lot of the same economic views as a libertarian does. I guess it might be like mind your own business. Might be one of the commandments he might put in, or something to that effect. I assume there will be something that's kind of tongue-in-cheek critique of religion in here. I don't know, let's jump into it.
Thou shalt not, but let's see if we can adapt this famous question. Number one, do not condemn people.
The mind your own business, don't condemn people, which I think that, you know, Hitchens, well, I think he condemns, well, he doesn't condemn people who are religious. He does condemn pretty thoroughly God and the tenets of religion, or like this type of thing. But he is generally careful about hating the sin, not the sinner, let's say, in a little bit tongue-in-cheek fashion.
On the basis of their ethnicity or
Oh, he's qualifying.
their color.
Yep, so condemn people on the basis of their beliefs, though, is the implication of this, that it is not just don't condemn people, which, you know, Hitchens did, or their behavior, as it were, which I think this is fine if he's going to just leave it at this, that not condemning people on characteristics that they cannot change, and condemning people on characteristics they're responsible for and they can change. Although to some extent that's brings up a bigger like discussion of like, you know, are people necessarily responsible for their beliefs and this sort of stuff? But this is outside the scope of like a reaction vid.
Number two, do not ever even think of using people as private property or
This one seems excellent.
as owned or as slaves.
Also, it's a little bit tongue-in-cheek slap back at, you know, thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's, like, cattle or women, putting women in the same category, so it's a little bit of a tongue-in-cheek.
3, despise those who use violence or the threat of it in sexual relations.
This seems like a good one to me, unless, of course, everyone's consensually on board for this. Of course, we get another classic, Christopher Hitchens maybe not looking his best while paused, but this seems excellent to me.
Number 4, hide your face and weep if you dare to harm a child.
I think that this one is fantastic as well. You know, the as people become more responsible for their own situation and behavior, they should be held to more of account, and children in general are not responsible for their behavior, and are not and to someone who is blameless, you shouldn't be inflicting harm upon them in a general sense. And so children are, you know, the epitome of blamelessness, and also as a class or a group of people, perhaps the easiest to harm in general, so another reason to not harm them.
Number 5, do not condemn people for their inborn nature.
This, of course, is to some extent, or, well, I mean, this is back to race and color, but I'm guessing he's talking about sexuality more here. Hitchens was, I believe he, like, calls himself a heterosexual, like, throughout his career, but he also talks about in his memoir having homosexual relations, so it's a bit hard to pin him down. I think he was bisexual and primarily, like, interested in women, but I assume this is about a little bit about sexuality here, and which in turn is a bit of a dig at religion in general, which generally seems to poke its nose in your business regarding sexuality, at least in the Catholic tradition or the Christian tradition.
Why would God create so many homosexuals only in order to torture and destroy them? Number 6, be aware that you too are an animal. And
this is one that is kind of amusing. All throughout, like, philosophy, or like my when I was attending Cal State Fullerton, a lot of the professors or a lot of the academics there in particular went out of their way to use the phrase non-human animals, which I think is a delightful phrase to sometimes use in a little bit of tongue-in-cheek way to ruffle feathers a little bit, because I do think that humans are fundamentally animals, and when you use the category non-human animals, you're implicitly making the assertion that humans are animals, and I think that, one, this is true, but two, it also tends to ruffle a little bit of feathers if you are using it towards, like, certain people. I generally don't use this phrase too much anymore, but when I was there, I used to love to use it to people who I know thought of humans as being, like, transcendentally more worthy of moral consideration than animals. To refer to animals as being non-human animals was always an amusing and very subtle, like, type of shtick, because it's only implied that you're calling humans animals. Well, I mean, it's kind of explicit, but it's not, you're not directing the attention towards it with the explicitness. But a little digression.
Dependent on the web of nature. Try and think and act accordingly. Number 7.
And of course, think and act accordingly is probably a bit of don't be an asshole to animals.
Don't imagine that you can escape judgment if you rob people with a false prospectus.
Ooh, don't scam people is a little bit different than don't steal from people, but I like it.
Rather than with a knife. Number 8,
I think that that's a good one, because the rather than a knife bit is, you know, it makes it so that if you are removing property from people in an unfair way, no matter what that unfair way is, whether it's by force or violence or through coercion/deceit, it is improper, right? And so Hitchens' kind of point here is that it, like, extends beyond thou shalt not steal.
Turn off that fucking cell phone. You can have no
That's
idea
funny.
how unimportant your call is to us. Number 9.
And that's, this is, like, before social media, because Hitchens passed, like, before social media exploded. I would be really keen on seeing what he would have to say about social media now, but unfortunately, alas, he has passed.
Fine. Denounce all jihadists and crusaders for what they are. Psychopathic criminals with ugly delusions.
I don't have a problem with this one either. And of course, this, he talks about don't condemn people for their innate nature, and don't condemn people for, you know, their race or ethnicity. But he, of course, is about condemning certain people, you know, those who are jihadists or crusaders, particularly. I'm not saying it's categorically impossible, but I've never found a theocratic state that I have in particular been a fan of. But Hitchens would say it's theoretically impossible, and I don't think that that's the case. I just don't know too many theocracies other than Western ones, and the Western religions in particular are perhaps more, let's say, aggressive, but I don't think it's necessarily categorically innate in nature. Also, nations in general are just, historically speaking, aggressive, so it's a little bit to pick on all the theocratic ones and be like, these guys is kind of, it's all guys, you know what I mean?
And terrible sexual repressions. Number 10, be willing to renounce any god or any faith if any holy commandments should contradict any of the above. In short,
that seems fairly reasonable. Although, obviously,
if any holy commandments, should contradict any of the above.
This is just a general subversion of religion rather than a moral rule in itself. But of course, you're responding to the Ten Commandments. Such a thing seems appropriate.
In short, don't swallow your moral code in tablet form.
Don't swallow your moral code in tablet form. So, let's try and get a good little... That's not a good... Actually, that's maybe a good one of Hitchens. And just digest a little bit. I think that I very much miss Hitchens. This was a little bit of a refreshing video. It wasn't exactly what I was necessarily expecting. I was expecting him to try and rip on religion more. I think he was generous in some spots, given if you have watched other Hitchens content, you know kind of what I'm talking about, where Hitchens was very anti-religion in a general sense. And so, seeing him, kind of be like, oh, that's a good commandment, this sort of stuff. Although it's hard to disagree with, thou shalt not steal, and thou shalt not, he didn't spend as much time on thou shalt not kill. There was another one, thou shalt not steal. I forget the other one he kind of agreed with, but, I very much did like his 10 laws, that he put forth afterwards, which generally amounted to, for the most part, mind your own business. And if someone is somehow different or this sort of thing that is not, necessarily your concern, don't condemn people, despise, do not think of people as property. Although, to be fair, he does make a little critique of thought crimes, and this is a thought, so he is talking about thought crimes. If you've seen a lot of his religious critiques, he is particularly, he always refers to 1984's George Orwell and talks about, thought crimes. It's against the rules to, condemn someone on the basis of their thoughts. He's anti-violence, don't condemn, but he's kind of it's also just it's tongue-in-cheek, and it's couched in the language of religion. Don't condemn people for their inborn nature. And so this is this is not about liberalism or freedom on its own, but is in fact a criticism of how unhumanist or non-humanist religions can be, who often condemn people for their inborn nature, and overall like him. Do not imagine that you can pass judgment if you have people with false prospectus. This one is the don't scam people, the slightly extended thou shalt not steal. But overall, like the vibe. Nice little fun piece. Definitely not one of his more viral pieces, although it does have, 36,000 likes. Probably going to add one here. But, it's an interesting video. Man, I really wish Hitchens was still alive. I mean, I could go on about that for forever, how I wish he was still around, and how I wish he could critique a whole bunch of stuff, especially given, his... I think, let's not get into that. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed. Feel free to like, comment, subscribe. If you have a particular recommendation for a Reacts video, feel free to put it up here. I'm probably going to try and branch out from Hitchens. While a lot of my views have been from these Hitchens videos, he's not the only thinker that I'm enamored with. Enamored is probably not even the right word, because I disagree with Hitchens on some stuff, specifically religion. But yeah, feel free to suggest it. Feel free to like, comment, subscribe if you enjoyed it. If you didn't enjoy it, whenever you see another one of my videos, you can and you don't want to see any more ever again, you can click the triple dot and then click block, videos from this user, and then you'll never have to see me again, although I hope that's not the case. And then also have a good day.